Welcome back, mutants. Streebo here with you from mutantville.com. Happy Memorial Day to you, to my fellow U.S. citizens. The rest of our friends from around the world, you're welcome to celebrate as well. But for us, we get the day off from work at least. So cheers. The celebratory blue moon as we finish up another long weekend at work, doing the old day job to pay the bills so we can support our art, so we can have our free time to do our art, get out in quest of the great work, what we all do. At times I think they should call it the thankless task of the great work, because I've been thinking about this lately. But I don't want to sound bitter about it at all, because that's all part of the challenge. You have to accept the challenge. You have to accept the conditions and the layout of the battlefield. Because for years, I think I was always kind of delusional that there were a lot of like-minded individuals like myself spread out in great number across the world, and there are not. There are very few like-minded individuals, and they're few and far between. But I always thought that kind of common sense and good taste would rule the day, and the thirst for knowledge and improvement and artistic expression would be seen as noble goals by all. But sadly, we live in a time of mediocrity, where the middle of the road is what's exalted and what's expected. And I just see this in so many ways, so many facets, so many mediums. American Idol being a perfect example. Trying to fit these musicians and singers into this mold, this popular artist mode, and these people aren't artists. I don't want to, slam anybody on American Idol. I don't know all of their individual stories. Of course, I'm generalizing, but, fuck it. If you get offended, you get offended. But they don't write their own songs. Most of them don't play any kind of instrument. They're just kids with a dream and some talent, but they're having that talent instead of nurtured and given the proper conditions for it to grow and develop and evolve. Instead, it's shaped and molded by external forces. And I think we're seeing that a lot across the medium, and it's just mediocrity is what's expected from the top and from the bottom. So there are a lot of good things going on. I mean, The Walking Dead, Game of Thrones, lots of cool movies popping up here or there, whether it's Oblivion or I'm hoping that Del Toro's next one, Pacific Rim, will be one of those, knock your socks off. Star Trek II, Into Darkness. I'm looking forward to checking that out later today. I've got to review it for MVP Mutant Radio, for Mutant TV. But there are a lot of things that ride that mediocrity line, like specifically a lot of these remakes. I don't have a problem with the Star Trek remake or reboot. I even thought it was really clever from a fan's perspective in that they, spoilers for Star Trek 2009 if you haven't seen it, but how they incorporated the original Spock played by Leonard Nimoy into the new movie, and they even had the two Spocks of two universes meet. I've always been a sucker for that. That's very Star Trek in the way that with the old classic episodes where they'd have the alternate universe where everybody had a mustache and and a goatee, and it meant they were evil. So I forget what that's called, the dark universe, whatever. Trekkies, some of my Trekkies out there, you'll have to correct me, but there's so much mediocrity. There's much more mediocrity than there is originality. Yeah, I don't want to throw out like a huge list of names for some of these movies. Like Fast and Furious stuff is, I've always just considered that stuff kind of mediocre. But mind you, I guess I gave up after the first one, so who knows. I do like The Rock though. The Rock is not mediocre. The Rock is awesome. He's become a star. He's become somebody that can draw me out to theater, or at least to the DVD screen. I mean, I'll watch something that he's in just to see what he's doing. But the quest for the great work. There has to, in an artist or a writer's or filmmaker or sculptor's evolution, there has to come a point, kind of a moment of awakening and a realizing that the great work is what we're seeking, because we kind of find our way into this from the side where you're just doing things for fun, you're just goofing around. As a kid, I wrote and drew my own Spider-Man comics. You know, it was always literally my dream to work for Marvel Comics. I wanted to work for Marvel. Screw DC. I thought Marvel was where it's at. You know, I want to do Spider-Man. I want to do the X-Men. I want to do Doctor Strange. I want to write and draw Shang-Chi, the Master of Kung Fu, Captain America, Iron Man. You know, I have so many favorites at Marvel. It's not until years later, I guess you become disillusioned at some point when you realize that there are no real stories that can be told with those franchise characters anymore. You know, not unless you're a superstar like Frank Miller or Grant Morrison, and you can convince them to do a one-off, a mini-series like All-Star Superman or The Dark Knight Returns, where it's not necessarily part of continuity, but it becomes part of the canon, the larger story, where you just kind of accept that at some point, you know, Batman's end story is The Dark Knight Returns, and how that plays out between he and Superman and the Joker and all of that. But for the most part, you know, mainstream is never allowed to change. We actually talked about this recently on the Vault of Mysterious Information, where I was guest hosting with Corey G, founder Corey G, and T-Shirt Joe actually joined us for the final part of the show, and we began talking about comic books, sequential illustration, graphic novels, superheroes, you know, crime noir stories, all the above. So it's a very interesting discussion. And we lamented the state of both the industry and the medium at present, where it's kind of become a feeder system for movies, for movie studios, where artists and writers are no longer taking advantage of the comic book medium or the sequential illustration medium, and are instead trying to create storyboards for movies. They're trying to limit themselves to cinematic storytelling. And again, I think this is just a push towards mediocrity and just another expression of it. And the strange thing is that, you know, I mentioned it's from the top and the bottom, is that people want it. It's like they want mediocrity. Because when something new or original or exciting comes out, it so rarely catches the public's imagination or the imagination of the fans of that particular medium as a whole. You know, there's always a resistance to it, a resistance to change, and a constant yearning for things to essentially stay the same, which is what we get, especially with monthly comics. We get it with movies. You know, this year, even though I enjoyed both movies, Texas Chainsaw 3D and the Evil Dead remake, I've lost connection somehow. Hold on a second, guys. Even though I enjoyed both the Evil Dead remake and um, Texas Chainsaw 3D. I do think it's part of that push towards mediocrity.